coordinator for Amnesty International. We also have Aiden Ellis, and she's a student activist coordinator. Um, the organization that they're involved, well, Ms. Nissa is involved with is the Amnesty International. It's a grassroots organization. It advocates for human rights. And I think Ms. Aiden Ellis' title kind of speaks for her. She's a student activist. So she'll tell a little bit about herself as well. Little housekeeping rules. Everyone needs to be on mute. You cannot unmute. We've muted you. Also, if you need to communicate, we need you to put your questions that you have in the chat box. It's going to be to the right of your screen. The presentation will be recorded and it'll be available for playback later. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce and present Ms. Nissa Khan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nissa. I'm an area coordinator for Amnesty International USA. And basically an area coordinator kind of deals with the local group chapters, which is, after you graduate, if you still want to be part of the human rights movement, we have local groups that are located all over Texas. And we do have like 2 local groups in Houston. And so today we're going to be talking about, safe ways to protest, and how to like de-escalate certain situations when we are at protests, and also to remind us the rights that we do have. I'm hoping everyone can see this. So our main logo is peaceful protest is a human right, and we have every right to voice our opinions. Like I said, my name is Nissa, and I am an area coordinator. I'm located in Wichita Falls currently. That's 2 hours north of Dallas. It's a very small town, but that's where I'm located. I'm going to pass it to you, Aiden, so that you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Nessa. So as has been said before, my name is Aiden Ellis. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I serve as a student activist coordinator for Texas. So there are 3 of us. I think we're all college students right now. And we basically work to manage and coordinate the actions of all these student groups around the state to make sure that they know what actions they should be taking to connect to the larger movement, and to kind of mentor them to make sure that their actions are actually making a difference. I'm currently based in Austin and Dallas. I go to SMU, so my group is in Dallas, but I'm in Austin because of all this pandemic stuff. My email in case you have any questions. Oh, and before we start getting into kind of slide where we can kind of mark how involved we've been in protesting as of right now. So if you're able to, if you could click on the link and follow it to that slide, that would be awesome. So as you'll see, there's a little pin widget on the left side. And if you click there, then you can choose a color. And if you could just like choose a color or a marker and mark in the box if you've protested or not, we're just kind of trying to get an idea of if you've protested in the past. Okay. So far, we have 3 people who've protested before. Yeah, as long as you make a mark in the box, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be picture perfect. No, we have a mix now. So I'm not going to stay on this for too long. We can go ahead and go to the next one. How many protests have you attended? So if you can try and write out a number, this might be more entertaining to see if people can do it or not. Okay, we're not getting a lot of action on that one. That's fine. Okay, I think people are finding it. You might have to go to the top of the board and click on the next slide. A lot. Okay. So 5, 3, a lot. Another 5. Okay. We're going to go ahead and go to the next frame. So click to the next slide. Do you think protests are effective? So mark, check, do whatever in the box. So yes, so far we have unanimous decision that you think it's yes. I guess if you didn't think it would be effective, then you wouldn't be here. Okay, no, that's also okay. So we can talk more about the effectiveness of protests throughout our presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out, and we're going to talk a bit more about amnesty. So as we've discussed kind of briefly in our introduction, Amnesty is a grassroots global human rights movement of people fighting injustice and promoting human rights. And when we say people, we mean like 7 million activists around the world taking action every year. And so that's a pretty significant number. And we also, our basic tenet is that all people deserve to enjoy fundamental human rights. The human rights which we refer to today and kind of internationally have been outlined in the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, which we'll review just a bit. And I want to emphasize that we're an independent, nonpartisan global organization. So we don't conform to any political ideology. We don't endorse candidates. So we remain independent. It's like, yeah, thank you. So when we talk about human rights, it's kind of a broad term, but human rights basically are the basic human rights and freedoms that all people are entitled to, regardless of nationality, sex, ethnic origin, race, religion, language, or any other status. And so these were outlined in the United Declaration of Human Rights, which is a post-World War II document, which basically outlines the fundamental inalienable rights that each person is entitled to. And these rights are universal, indivisible, and inalienable. So next.
Sorry, I'm just going to unmute myself. But now we're just going to go into the rights to peaceful protests. So basically, some of the fundamental human rights that we do have, and these are some of the things that we should remember when we do go to a protest, that we have our right of freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, protection to a medic, and the right to complain. And so when we talk about our freedom of speech, as like I said earlier, as individuals, we have every right to voice our opinion, especially now with the Black Lives Movement. People are voicing their opinion and they're coming together to create that action. And we have the right to organize it because, we're only, organizing peaceful protests, and, we do try to have the law enforcement involved. And I think the only time a law enforcement does get involved is when things do get violent. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if there are peaceful individuals who are protesting, they have the right to do that. When it's violent, then you have to de-escalate the situation. And like I said before, unnecessary or excessive force should not be, that shouldn't be allowed, because that is our basic human right, and the threat of prosecution and detention. And I feel like we have seen a lot of cases when it comes to ICE where individuals are been taken and put in detention centers when really they actually have the right to voice their opinion that, I'm seeking asylum. So next we talk about the freedom of assembly. So like I said, law enforcement must facilitate and not restrict a peaceful public assembly. If anything, they should be involved in keeping us safe. If a peaceful protest does turn violent, like the law enforcement should protect us, and violent acts of individuals is not a pretext to restrict or to impede the rights of the majority. So if there's a majority of people who are protesting and only very few individuals are being violent and that can harm others, that is when the law enforcement should be involved, but it's not the majority that should be penalized for this.
Yeah, which is basically exactly what Mrs. said, which continues into the protection of the right to freedom of assembly, wherein law enforcement plays a large role in this. Law enforcement is expected to facilitate and not restrict peaceful public assembly. And Nissa already touched on this, but when a minority tries to turn a peaceful assembly into a violent one, law enforcement should protect the peaceful protesters and not use violent acts of the few just as a pretext to restrict or impede the exercise of fundamental rights of the majority. So the emphasis on here is that peaceful protest is a Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so also there within that right is the freedom from excessive use of force. So as we've seen, there has been an increase in the use of excessive force during protests, but the right that is laid out says that there should be a freedom from this. In the policing of nonviolent protests, as in peaceful protests, police must avoid the use of force unless it becomes unavoidable in order to either defend themselves or the public or the peaceful majority. And when this use of force must be used, they must use the minimum amount of force necessary. So also have we seen the use of force equipment used to disperse crowds, which includes like rubber bullets, gas, stun grenades. We've seen a lot of it this past summer. Necessary, proportional, and lawful. And that also ties into the idea that there's a right to medical assistance. So if you do get injured during a protest, you have a right to medical assistance without delays. And then finally, freedom from arbitrary arrest and detention. So if you're arrested, you have the right to be told the reason of your arrest, and you also have the right promptly after your arrest have access to a lawyer and to your family via phone call or communication or in person in some instances. And also no person under any form of detention may be subject to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. And that's a right that we should all be guaranteed.
Okay, when it comes to the right to complain, if any of your human rights have been violated, you can complain, and there is information on how to do so. And all violations of human rights by the police or the law enforcement has to be investigated fully, promptly, and independently. It is not advised that you wait, the sooner the better. So during a protest, it is advised that you document it, videos, I don't know, write things down, pictures, so that you know that if there is a human right that has been violated, at least you have that it's been filmed, and actions when it comes to possibly the police, police brutality, or people who are injured, and on the protesters and stuff like that. So basically, remember to document and to also to investigate it fully, promptly, and independently, and do it as soon as you can. Next thing, I find this really important. When you're going to a protest, you need to know how to prepare, plan ahead. Basically, you know, what are the actions that you are planning to do, and what is the gain that you're going to get out of this protest? be calm and focused, because during a protest, things can be very threatening. It can affect your mental health and your stability. And I think it's also a really good idea that you have some sort of buddy system. Have water and snacks, stay hydrated, carry your identification. That's also really important, in case of any kind of emergency, if you're injured or if someone is trying to locate you. Wear comfortable and protective shoes. And it is advisable that you wear clothes that, protect you from the sun and pepper spray exposure or tear gas. Things like that can happen. And like, especially during COVID, wear a mask. And so this little flyer Amnesty has created, and you can find it on the website. It kind of goes into a lot more detail in case, like, if you have contact lenses or you need prescription medication, such as like EpiPen, insulin, energy snacks, like I said before. They do say that you could wear like goggles or an N95 face mask. But remember to stay safe. And then what to bring, like I said before, water is really important. Have your mask, have snacks, your identification, an emergency contact, in case, have some money on you in case, you don't have your credit cards, etc. And tools to document, because we don't know what the outcome is going to be during the protest. And as I covered before, like to document a situation in case there is police brutality or a protester is injured, it's better to document it and to act upon it right then and there. Sunscreen, alcohol or water-based, in case of, any chemical exposure. It won't, I guess, for your skin, like you won't get a rash or anything like that. Inhaler, EpiPen, insulin, so any kind of medication that you use, it should be brought. Menstrual pads, don't use tampons because you can get injured. And if you are taken by the police, you don't know when you're going to be able to take that out. Wet wipes and tissues, and have a basic first aid kit just in case you get hurt.
Yeah, so we're going to touch on a bit more of what not to do when you're preparing for the protest. Nissa kind of touched on some of this, but don't apply oil-based products. So this includes like Vaseline, mineral oil, and sunscreen. You don't want to use oil-based sunscreen because that will trap in, like if you are sprayed by pepper spray, it's also oil-based. So those two things will just like meld and it will just hold on to your skin longer. So you want to use alcohol or water-based products so that you don't have it trapped in your skin. Don't wear contact lenses if you can avoid it. It's kind of like when you're in a chemistry lab in school. What's going to happen is if you get tear gas or pepper spray in there, it's just going to stay in your eye. So if you can avoid it, wear glasses that day. Also, don't wear things which can be easily grabbed. So this includes like longer earrings or like loose hair. Try and have your hair tied up. Don't wear like super baggy clothing. But at the same time, you do want to make sure that most of your skin demonstration alone. If you can avoid it, Are we back?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I don't know if that was on my end or someone else's. Anyways, so yeah, don't forget to eat food and drink lots of water. I'm not quite sure when that dropped out. Okay, cool.
I think you were on the last one, so you're good.
Okay, perfect. Sorry for that, y'all. Okay, so now how to protect your online privacy while protesting. So Amnesty International has long documented the ways that activists and human rights defenders throughout the world have been targeted by governments, especially when the risk is heightened with mass surveillance. So we're a global movement. We're kind of shaped by that. So we wanted to give y'all a few pointers on how to protect your online privacy while protesting, because this is becoming increasingly important. So update your apps, computer and phone. This is just important to make sure everything's up to date. Commonly, these are like small bug fixes for security reasons. So just make sure to keep things up to date. Use strong and different passwords. I'm sure you've heard this before. Set up two-factor authentication if you can. Use HTTPS, which is encrypted, which prevents people from basically like going into your computer through the websites you visit. Turn your phone to airplane mode if you want to. That's probably your best case scenario, but also turn off your facial recognition or fingerprint unlock and use passcodes to unlock your phone. There have been cases of police officers using the biometrics like your fingerprint or your facial recognition software if you're unconscious. And this is a very extreme case, but if you want to prevent that, make sure to turn those off. And also another thing with turning your phone
Sorry for the technical difficulties. I just contacted Aiden and she's having some issues.
Hi everyone, so sorry about that. Okay, I think we should be good. Can someone tell me what the last thing I said?
You were just talking about police using facial recognition in case of being unconscious.
Okay, great. So yes, we suggest that you use a passcode instead of the biometric unlocking mechanisms. But this being said, if you want to turn your phone on airplane mode, that is an option that you can take. But if you do want to document it, you need to understand that if you are live streaming, this is going to compromise your privacy, and that's a decision that you need to make. There we go. Okay, so while you're protesting, there are a few things to keep in mind. But like once you've planned ahead, you have a group, you're out there, you know what to expect. We suggest maybe going to the area where you'll be protesting ahead of time. So You kind of have a familiar layout of places you can go if things do go awry. But attitude is super important when you're protesting. Remember that you're powerful, and the reason that protests are effective is because they do make change, and they do illustrate that a large amount of people share the same opinion and want the same change. So keep rooted in that idea that you're powerful and that you are fighting for justice. Also, in a lot of instances, the primary weapon of the police is fear. So once you control that, you know your environment and you know how to deal with pepper spray and other police tactics, that can empower you a lot to get done what needs to get done, which is your protesting. And obviously, you hear this a lot, but use common sense. It can go a long way in high stress situations like protesting. So keep your wits about you, assess what's going down and what needs to be done, and make sure that you stay calm and focused so that if you see threats or you see things kind of increasing in intensity, you can make a decision before that decision has been made for you. And so that you can react to danger in a warning, not before it's actually there with you. And also cool down others who exhibit panic behavior. Protests are very intense and demanding, and even people who've protested before can get overwhelmed and start panicking. So that's why it's important that you're with a group of people who you know well, and that know you well, so that you can keep an eye on each other and make sure that you're taking care of each other. And then beware of rumors. You may hear things during the protest about things that are down the road. So just beware of those. Keep in mind that they're usually false and are there to foster fear. So deal with the known truth and make decisions that you're comfortable with in the moment. And then finally, if you feel comfortable, document, film or write down police actions, brutality, injuries, or just the event in general, so that you can remember it, but also make complaints if necessary.
Okay, so police and protest. Like I touched on this before briefly, we have a right to protest peacefully, and we shouldn't be bolstered by the law enforcement. And police should proactively engage with the protests that we do plan and we organize, because end of the day, that is our human right to voice our opinions. And the responsibility for keeping the protests peaceful has to be shared with everyone and anyone who's planning to attend. Because obviously we don't want it to escalate to a violent situation, and when it comes to the police, they're going to obviously try to de-escalate that. And as we've seen before, majority of us get blamed, even though there may be just a few individuals. So it is important to just keep that in mind, what our responsibilities are as people and what our rights are. And law enforcement officers have the right to defend themselves, and to protect the safety of the public. So if they feel like they're being threatened, they can protect themselves, but their main, their main duty is to protect us. Even when confronting violence, the law enforcement must work within the law and in conformity with international standards that governing the use of force. And I think coming back to this, Amnesty does have a lot of reports when it comes to the force and police brutality. And I think that sometimes reading those things can help us de-escalate a situation that we find if we're confronting any violence. And this is one of the actions that you can actually take when it comes to law enforcement officials. And the Safe Protest Toolkit actually gives you a whole letter that you can actually just copy and paste and just mail it to your government officials. Because the more letters we write is what creates an impact, because they'll get an influx and then they know that they're going to have to change their system, because people like us are, we're worried for our safety. And it's also a reminder that, we have the international human rights standards and the US Constitution. And so writing these letters to our government officials kind of reminds them that they need to reform and maybe pass a bill.
So now we have some information on what to do if things go awry. In certain cases, the police will use dispersal tactics, and in many ways, those involve chemicals. So ahead of time, how you can prepare for these in advance. Like we've already said, use water or alcohol-based sunscreen or products so the oil won't be trapped on your skin. Minimize skin exposure. That's also the sun so you don't get sunburned, but it's also so that if you do encounter any of these chemical dispersal tactics, it won't stay on your skin. Thirdly, gas masks give good facial protection. If you have one, if you have access to one, and if you know how to use one properly, feel free to do so. And then ahead of time, you can even pack a bandana soaked in lemon juice and store it in a Ziploc baggie in your backpack or whatever bag you bring with you. And this is known to kind of help your breathing if you do end up having some breathing issues because of tear gas or pepper spray. Now, in the moment, if you encounter tear gas or pepper spray and it actually gets on your person, remember to stay calm, which is very difficult. But stay calm if you can. Put on your protective gear if you start seeing it down the way, but it hasn't impacted you yet. If you are sprayed with it, blow your nose, rinse your mouth, cough and spit. Try and get it like away and like out of your mouth if you can. This is when it gets like particularly heinous that these tactics are used in the middle of a pandemic that is spread by respiratory droplets. So also be aware of who's around you and things like that. Also, individuals who wear contacts, in the event that you had to wear them or you forgot to take them out, you're going to want to remove these as soon as you can with clean or uncontaminated fingers, which means you might have to employ the help of a friend. And do not rub it in as much as you might want to. This will just make it go deeper into your skin and make it more difficult for you to get out eventually. And as soon as you can, we suggest taking a very cold shower to rinse it off because the cold water will close your pores and prevent its absorption deeper into your skin. We included this slide. It's best practices for law enforcement policing demonstrations. So you're just basic tenets that you want to remind your local police precinct or sheriff about ahead of time or police chief, especially if you do write those letters, which we will send you a template, but they're supposed to facilitate peaceful public assemblies, not quell them. They're supposed to protect them. Their job is to de-escalate violent situations, not exacerbate them. They ultimately can make the decision to disperse a crowd, but in this case, they should only use of force when necessary and proportional. Their role is to minimize damage, and they're accountable to the public and the judiciary, and that's us. So our job is to document that and remain attentive so that if they do violate something, it will come to light.
So basically now after the protest, remember that, you have the right to complain. So basically, like we said before, it's important that you document anything that happens during the protest, either writing it down, taking videos, whatever it may be, especially if any violations of our human rights are known. Maintain the momentum, work with others that, demand turn into actions and ultimately make a meaningful change. And I think that's why we have these protests, because as a collective, we're voicing something that really matters to us and we're asking for that reform. And always remember that a peaceful protest is a human right. And Amnesty International advocates this really, well. And that's why they created this toolkit that would help us navigate when it comes to protests and how we could go about it and to keep us safe and to also remember the rights that we have. And Aiden, do you want to take over for this?
Sure, I can take over.
Okay.
Also, if you are interested in sustained action and keeping up that momentum, protests are great, but they also need to come with sustained action, and that's the only way that you're going to create the change that you want to see. So we highly suggest starting a student group and joining the Famnesty, which is a phrase I use way too much. But Amnesty International, like we said, is a grassroots movement. So we are nothing without our members. Our members, whether they're like in high school or they're in our local groups and they've been with us for 50 years. These are the people that make Amnesty what it is. These compile our 7 million activists. So if you are interested, we're dropping a Google form in the chat. If you want to learn more about the organization, maybe you want to start a student group of your own, sign your name there and Nissa or I will reach out to you. It's a great opportunity to learn about global human rights issues and violations, teach your peers, and also lead them in meaningful research-backed actions that we know will make a change in the world. So with that, that's the end of our presentation.
Thank you both, Nissa and Aiden. Very good information about knowing your rights when we're protesting, or just knowing your rights while you're out there. A lot of things you guys brought up today I didn't know, and I know now about things to bring when you go and protest. Those are good things to know, what to bring, what to do if you're involved, all the information there. At this time, we'd like to entertain questions. So if you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat and we'll let Nissa and Aiden address them.
Common violation of these rights internationally. I specifically, when it comes to our global movement, other than the United States, I know like in India, it was quite an issue a couple of years ago to even have the rights to protest, just because it's a very secluded country. And but the fact that they've even started an amnesty there, people have been protesting. And I mean, one of their biggest protests was based on climate change. And that was, I think that was done last year. So I think constantly there is a battle. I mean, we also have our prisoners of conscience that, one of our Amnesty members in Turkey has been detained because he was fighting for people in his country. So I think that it happens quite often. And when we work on a prisoners of conscience campaign, we try to write letters, sign petitions, whatever we could do to say that we stand with this individual and please release them from from where they are, because they've been taken away from their families. And these countries do have a right to protest. They have the right to their opinion. And I think government officials just forget that. And so it is up to us to take whatever actions that Amnesty does provide for us to go further.
We have another question. Can we bring pepper spray to protest for protection?
That's a very interesting question. Actually, the thing about protests is I guess there's no like really defined like guide as to what you can bring on your person or what you can't. So I'm assuming that if like you wanted to, like there's nothing preventing it, but I think a large part of our presentation was about getting in front of that you're protesting and being empowered so that you know how to manage your protesting before it escalates to a time when you need protection. So we are all for peaceful protesting. Amnesty actually does not have a stance. We don't have a stance on violence as in a form of protest. We are full in support of peaceful protesting. But I guess in the instance where you feel like you need to protect yourself, we would say try to avoid it at all costs. Pay attention, keep your wits about you so that you don't get in that situation. But I guess there's nothing like formally preventing you.
Thank. Someone has asked, one join Amnesty International.
I'm actually dropping a link how you can join our movement. You can be an individual member. I guess our fees for, I want to say for students it's about $10, but I think for a normal member it's about 15 for the year, if I'm not wrong. But we do highly encourage students to make their own group on their campus because you are provided with those resources, and if you graduate, your area is likely to have a local group, and so it always makes you stay active and involved with the human rights movement.
Yeah, and also to become an official voting member of Amnesty, you are expected to pay a fee, and that's mainly because we are 7 million activists around the world, and that's really our membership fees are how we remain independent and nonpartisan. But also at the same time, there are waivers for that fee, and so it's not like you have to pay that in order to be part of the membership. But yeah, I would say definitely, maybe I'm biased, but
Well, thank you both. I certainly want to again thank you, and I know our students thank you. Um, Dr. Rayna, did you have anything you would like to share with us today before we close?
Sure. So I dropped the link in the chat earlier for our luncheon lobbies on Fridays. Every Friday at 12:30, the WebEx link is there for you to join me. It's a drop-in, shoot out a letter, post something on social media, sign a petition, whatever you want for whatever causes you believe in. It just takes a second online to do this type of online advocacy. So groups like Amnesty International and other groups often have everything already filled out for you, and you just put your name and your email, and they do the hard work for you, and they send all that directly to your representatives. So if you're interested in online advocacy, every Friday at 12:30, I'm there to help you out and to guide you, but it's super fast. You can just send your email and then go about your day.
Again, thank you, Nissa and Aiden, for the information. Very informative. My students, thank you, Dr. Rayna, for the resource. And that concludes our session. Please see the chat for the links that Ms. Nissa and Aiden had provided, and also Dr. Rayna for more information. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.